it's Becky, and today I wanted to do a couple of things with you guys using some of the beads that came in some of the bead boxes that we got this month. And one of the things that we got were these flower beads that have a hole in the center. And how you can make a drop with these that faces forward instead of facing downward with these and earrings. And I have an example here of one that I did where I made a drop and it faces forward. And I did that by taking a little bead and securing a piece of craft wire through it, and then making a large loop on the back, just a wire wrapped loop. And you can use a smaller loop. I wanted a large loop for, design wise. I like the way it looked. I'm going to probably use a smaller loop for the ones that I do today though. And that way, when it dangles, it faces forward. Or if it's hanging from an ear, you'd be able to see it facing that way. This came in the Jesse James Magical Mystery Bead Box, and it is a dangle that was already created using a small pearl, a head pin, and a prong bead cap. But when it dangles downward. So you can't actually see the pretty pearl that's in it unless you do something like, I don't know, have some beads sandwiched on either side of it that will help secure it in an upward facing position like this, which honestly just gave me a really great idea for another pair of earrings that I'm going to do at a later date. So I'm going to set this aside because I'm not going to be using this. It was just an example of something that you can do with these. And so what I'm going to show today is making a dangle like this a couple of different ways. One way, I'm going to use craft wire, and I'm going to make a wrapped loop at the back like this one, and we'll attach it to earring dangles. And I'm going to use these beads. Now these beads all came in the Softflex Cherry Blossom design kit. So I'm going to be using those for this. This is the design kit and some of the beads that came in that. And then the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a head pin, because you don't have to use craft wire for this. You can use a head pin to make a dangle. And so I'm going to do a head pin with this one. And I'm going to make a wire wrapped loop at the back that is angled up, and that way it will allow the flower to face forward when it's part of an earring. I'm also going to show at the end of this how to make a bead embellished ear wire like this. So we'll do that later. And then this one, these are from the Jesse James Magical Mystery Bead Box that just came. They haven't done the official unveiling of this box yet, so I'm not going to be uploading this until after that happens. So as of this filming, they haven't unveiled it. But there's a lot of really cool floral things in here that I'm excited to use and work with. And one of them is these flower beads that actually came in a little mix with some 11O seed beads. So I'm going to be using the 11O seed beads for this one. With this, I'm going to use the craft wire to get the flower on an angle, but instead of making a wire wrapped loop, it's going to be like the bottom of a head pin sort of. So I can stack some other beads on top of it and then attach it to some ear wires. Now I already made these ear wires in advance. I'll link the very short tutorial that I have for how I make my favorite ear wires. So, because I'm not going to go through that in this one. The only ear wires I'm going to show you how I make are going to be bead embellished ones. So, and we'll do that with these earrings. So let's get started. First of all, let's go over what materials I'm using. I am using 22 gauge silver plated copper craft wire, Softflex craft wire. That it's one of my faves. I like using it. It's easy to work with and really consistent. That's what I made this one with. And then for tools, I'm going to be using bail making pliers for both the ear wires and for making my loops. With this one, because I used a larger loop for it, I used this step. I'm going to be using a smaller loop. I'm going to use this step for my loops on the other ones that I create a loop with. I'm going to be using some flush cutters for cutting my wire. I'm going to be using some chain nose pliers for managing my wire ends and helping wrap. And I think that is all that I'm using for these today. So let's get started. The first ones that I'm going to be doing are the ones where I use craft wire and then make a loop at the back. So I'm going to do that with this one. And for this, I'm gonna get, let's see, maybe, I think 3 inches should be enough for this. And you're gonna want 2 lengths of it for 2 pairs of earrings. I'm gonna go ahead and just do 1 earring on camera, so you don't have to sit here and watch me make 2 pairs of earrings for all of this. So, but I'm cutting them the same length at the same time for consistency's sake. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my loop. And to do that, I'm going to make a little bend over here. I'm going to grab my 6-step bail making pliers, and I said I'm going to use this one. It's not the smallest one, it's the second smallest. And so for that, just pinch it with this and then pull this end around, adjust my pliers so they're not in the way, and pull it all the way around. And I can use my fingers because it is pretty soft wire. And then when it starts getting a little harder to manage, I can grab my chain nose pliers and tuck and wrap the end. This gives me a nice consistent loop on this side. And using the bail making pliers means that when I go to do my second one, the second one will be the same size. And I've got a little bit of extra wire poking out of there. So I'm just gonna take my flush cutters and cut that off. All right, so now I've got a nice straight loop. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to be very careful about this part, because bending next to where you've wrapped can sometimes snap your wire. So I'm just going to just gently bend it forward like that, so it's at an angle. And now I'm going to slide my flower beads on, and it's going to be a little loosey-goosey, and I'm okay with that. I am okay with it being slightly loose. But I've got 2 different sizes of the same color, and I really like the way that they kind of nestle. So I'm using both of them for this one. You could do just one, that's fine. Then I'm going to be using this small, I think this is a 3mm pearl. Came in the kit, and use that for the center. Like that. Now that that's in place, I'm going to pinch it with my thumb. I'm going to hold it there. I'm going to bend this wire upward and still pinching it from the back and the front. I'm going to start bending it around because I want this wire to swirl around this pearl and help secure the pearl right there in the middle of this. All right, so that's enough swirl for me. I'm gonna cut off my excess and tuck my end in. I'm gonna tuck it underneath the pearl. Okay, so now I have a loop over here on the back that I can attach to an ear wire. Okay, let me show you how I do an embellished ear wire real quick. With this one, this is going to be my second pair of earrings later. Going to embellish it with this sparkly disco ball bead. It's not actually called a disco ball. I don't know what it's called. All right, so the first step is after you've cut a length of beading wire, and this is, let me see, looks like this is 3 inches as well. 3 inches of beading wire. And this is the cut end with the flat cut. I'm going to use the smallest loop of my bail making pliers, and I am going to make the first loop. Now this is the loop that I'm going to open and close to attach it to my earring. And I'm just gonna close it up a little bit better right there. Now, this is the fun part. This is when I put on the bead for my embellishment. And that's right there. Now, the wire comes around this way. So whichever way that this little P or Q or however you want to call it, wherever that's pointing towards, I want to bend away from there with my pliers, and do this very carefully so you don't damage the bead that is on there. I'm just going to point this wire directly away from there. So I've created a bend in the wire that points the opposite direction to my loop. Now I get my bail making pliers again, and I want this thing to point away from the loop that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to be using the largest loop. You can use the second largest if you want. I find the largest fits better in my ears, gives me the best amount of dangle, and I'm just going to carefully grip it and then pull this around to the other side like this. And once I've got that made, I'll just give it a little bit of a bend here, right above where my bead is. You make a little straight line from the top of the bead that way. Cut off a little bit at the end. And then this part is critical. File the end. If you've got a burr cutter or something like that, a burr grinder, you can use that. I usually just get these metal files and smooth that out. And that's how I make an embellished ear wire, something that has a bead on it. I'm gonna go ahead and open up this ear wire. Hold on. I'm gonna give the curve a smush with my pliers to work harden it a little bit so it doesn't, you know, come apart or bend back too much when it's in my ear. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm gonna open this one up, slide my dangle on, close it. It needs to be facing the other way. went to all that trouble so that you could see the inside of my flower, and then I put it on the wrong way. All right, so here we go. Dangle. And now I have a cherry blossom with some sparkle. And I'll make a second one of these later. But that's my first completed earring. All right, so the second one that we're going to be doing is going to be using a ball head pin, this flat pressed glass bead, a 4mm pearl in kind of a dusty pink colorway. And when I first put this on, I had just the pearl in here, but it looks like a nipple. So I grabbed these little spacers and it makes it look a little less like a nipple when I do this. So for this one, you're going to put it through here, and then on the back, kind of press with your finger on the bottom and grip the flower. Don't press too hard because you don't want to break the glass. And then just take your thumb and press gently in one direction so that the wire is bent at kind of a 45-degree angle from where the head pin is coming from. And this is where we're going to make our loop, is right here. So, okay, so for this, I'm just gonna bend this over here to the side. And then use my bail making pliers to bend it back around on itself. And it's a little fiddly because you've got this is going to be spinning around doing, oh man, fidget spinner earrings. Here we go. All right, so now that that's done there, I'm going to start wrapping this loop. And this bead will get a little bit in the way while you're doing it. And that's okay. That's okay. Because it'll all be okay. All right. I think twice is good enough for me. And this loop looks a little bit messy. I'm okay with it though. And I'm just gonna bend it up a little bit more. Actually, let's straighten this out. You don't want to bend it back and forth too much. But there we go. That should dangle pretty well from these. Now I already made these with these pressed glass check beads. So let's figure out which way I want this to face. This way. Open that up, slide this on. So you don't have to use craft wire. If you just have head pins, you can make it this way. That's the second earring that I've made. And now for the third one, instead of making a loop and attaching it that way, it's going to be kind of the bottom of a head pin for this. So I'm going to move that over there because I'm not using that. But I'm going to use these beads that all came in the Jessie James Magical Mystery Bead Box for this one. And I'm going to use the gold-plated wire for this. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did with this one, where I've got a little swirl in the middle with my wire. And instead of 3 inches for this one, I'm going to go ahead and go with about 5. It's okay if there's more. You can always use scrap wire for things, but I think 5 inches is going to be how long I want this wire to be. All right, and let me make a second one for when I make the second one. So that'll be ready to go. And all right, for this one, I started the other one with the loop and then I did the swirl first. So for this one, I am not going to be doing that. Actually, what I'm going to be doing is making a bend first, because we're not having a loop on the back. We're just going to have a bend. And it's going to be a nice right angle. And I've left plenty of room at the front of this for the wrapping and plenty of room here for it to be a head pin. That's why I made it a little bit longer. So then we put on our flower first. And all right, so let me get out my 11-0 seed bead that I'm using as my center. All right, so that's all the way there in the center. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to push from the back to make sure that it doesn't slide up. And then I'm going to just bend this around upwards like so. And then pinch it while I bend this around. Try not to get it caught on the petals. It's caught on a petal. All right. There we go. It's definitely caught on a petal. And I'm trying to do my loop. This is very fiddly, by the way. And it's okay if it's not perfect, because none of us is perfect. And it can be gorgeous even without being perfect. Just like you can be gorgeous without being perfect. All right. Now, I have it wrapped. I'm going to tuck this edge underneath the seed bead. There you go. And maybe I should have done the bend after. It's okay. It's a little dangly, and that's fine. It's going to be dangly. All right, now I want some height on the back before I put my bead on here. So I'm going to use some of these gold seed beads. I'm going to stack them up on the back to give it some height. And these also came in the Magical Mystery Bead box. Okay. So you can see on the back, we've got some height. And adding these beads in the back helps give this less wiggle. Adding these seed beads back here. All right, so for the rest of this, oh, wrong way. I've got these pretty bead caps that also came in the Jesse James Magical Mystery Bead box. And these light lavender faceted glass beads. And so I've got all of this. Let's look around at the back. I have my 3 seed beads on the back, keeping this in place, and I've got this right above it. Now I'm going to, with that facing that way, I'm going to bend it over to the left because I like to be able to attach my ear wire this way without having to change the direction of any of that. So that's how I'm going to bend this loop back, and I think, yeah. So bend all the way back, wrap it around a couple of times. Straighten it out. All right, let's cut off our excess. It's like you could have done it with 4 inches, but I like having the 5 in case I need it. So I'm just really happy that this idea I had worked because I hadn't tested this out. All right, and here's my basic ear wire that I made earlier, and I turned it the wrong way. All right, close this ear wire. Now that I've got this, and this is going to dangle the right way. So that's 3 different ways that you can make a front-facing dangle with a flower-shaped bead that has a hole in the center. All right. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Maybe you learned something. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you like my stuff, go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss any new ones. And if you've gotten the Magical Mystery Bead Box or the Cherry Blossom kit, then you have all the beads for these. If you didn't, you can get these, you can probably buy most of these in other kits and other bead mixes. I'm sure you can find some of these flower ones. I know they have strands of these for sale on the Softflex site. Also, I think Jill Wiseman has some on her site too. But they're really fun to work with and to play with. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks. Bye.